All right, it's Chris with Aerotech, and I'm going to walk you through on how to make sure your driver is configured correctly if you use user authentication or account code. So basically, you have some type of username and password, or just a code that you enter in to have access to the copier, whether it's just for security purposes or for tracking purposes. If you're not familiar, basically the machines do have built-in functions. It's got two different options, authentication and account track. They kind of do the same thing, but they do vary slightly. So we'll need to know which version you're using first. So if you only have to put in a password, then you're probably using account track. If you have to put in a username or a username and password, you're probably on authentication. If you have the option for a public user, then you're using authentication. If you're not familiar, call us or go through our website, which I have pulled up here. You'll see request service at the top. Pop this up, put in your name, machine ID number, contact info, and just let us know your question. Just say, we're trying to install a print driver and we need to configure it for the authentication option, and we're not sure which method we're using. And a rep will call you and walk you through this. It's very easy, but there are a few steps. So once we know what version you're using, if it's authentication or account track, then we can make the necessary changes. So say you install the print driver and it doesn't print, or it just kind of flashes blue and it deletes the job. It's probably because you have this and we have to configure it. So if you've got the driver installed, then you'll go to your control panel. If you don't have the driver installed, I've got another tutorial video you can follow that's going to walk you through on how to download a print driver for a Windows system. Mac users, there'll be another tutorial video for you guys as well. But if you're on a newer system, it's a little harder to get to your control panel. Right click and go to search. It's going to be your easiest way. Type in control, click on the app. Go to devices and printers. Under hardware and sound, you should see the option. And you'll see your print drivers installed. And I've got a bunch, but find the one you want to make the changes to. So single click it to highlight it, and then right click and go to printer properties. So we're going to go to demo. If you come to the configure tab, the machine should, or the driver is set up in a way by default where it should communicate with the machine through SNMP to find what settings or options are enabled or installed on your device. So if you come over to device options and scroll down, if you had authentication or account track, it should say it's enabled. If you have the option for public user, it should be enabled. Public user option is used for, say, just general office stuff that you don't necessarily need tracked. But oftentimes we use this so public user will be defaulted to black and white only, and it restricts the use of color. So you have to put in a code if you want to use color. If not, it just prints under public user and you can only do black and white. Even if you send it in color, it still prints in black and white. So that could be set to allow. If that's just a user authentication option, not an account track option. So let's say user authentication is enabled. I'm going to lie and just click obtain settings, turn auto off, and then it lets me manipulate it, make the changes. So again, this should be done automatically. You should find that there. Don't do this step what I just did. This is just for the demo. So this will be set if you're using authentication. If you're using account track, then this will be set. So once we know which one you're working with, you can come to your General tab and click on Preferences. And we can store this code in the driver. There is also an option if you say you use various codes and you need to enter in a different code often. I can show you how to do that as well with a little pop-up. But for this step, this is the most commonly one used. You're going to click on your Basic tab. So again, we went to, oops, move this down. Preferences, we got this window here. And you're going to click on your Basic tab. Off to the right, you're going to see Authentication/Account Track. This is where we need to go. I'll open up. So if you just want to print as a public user, make sure it's set to public user. By default, it's usually set to recipient user, and it's usually going to put in the username for your workstation, your computer, which is probably different than what we have programmed in the machine, because usually that's just a custom list that you guys have created that we've added. So if you know the code that you want to use, or the name, you can put in the name and or password. Sometimes you just have a name without a password. Regardless, whatever you put in there, if you want to make sure it's correct, click this verify option. I didn't put anything in there, so let's say we just type that in. If it's not correct, you'll get this message. If it is correct, if you've got a matching username or username and password, you'll click this and it'll say verification has succeeded. Not something you have to do every time, it's just to make sure you've got the right code. Important to know whatever name or name and password, which can be, they're not just numeric, you can use the alphabet. It's got to be exact, so it is case sensitive. So if the username is Chris, it's got to have a capital C if that's how it's programmed in the machine. Use the verify option to check. If you're printing just as a public user, make sure public user is selected. If you have account track, same deal. Put in your name or name it, or so account track is either going to be name and password or just password. So put that in, make sure it's right, click verify, then click OK. Click your apply button if you made some changes. And now if you come to your general tab, you can a test page. If you want the option to change the account code on, say, you're printing and you're billing clients, and you're constantly printing for various clients. If you come to your settings tab, you can have a pop-up box, authentication settings, and you can do verify and pop-up. Click OK. Now when you go to print, you're going to get a pop-up, and this is going to pop up every time. But it will be automatically filled in with whatever you defaulted to. So if you came in your preferences, you went to your basic tab, and you clicked on authentication, whatever you set it to here is what's going to be kind of pre-filled in that box that pops up. So you can just delete and make the changes on the pop-up as you need. Once you close out of that application, say you're in Word, you close out and you open it back up, it will always come back to this username and password for that pop-up. And that's really it. You just need to make sure that you know if you're using authentication or account track. If you want the pop-up, come to your settings. The newer machines, you'll see authentication as its own tab. Some of the older drivers, it'll just say here, the pop-up and authentication to verify. Just put a checkbox in those. And under your preferences tab is where you can set the default for either public user or recipient user, and whatever account you have programmed in the machine as far as name and password, you need to make sure it matches exact, and the verify button is a good way to do so. And that's basically it. That should work for you. If you have account codes, you just need to make sure you are using the model specific driver. You cannot use a different version Konica driver than what the machine is with the account codes. It will not work. It's got to be exact. If you're unsure, right click on the driver, go to printer properties. The model should say, you know, what machine you have. Now this can be a tiny bit confusing, just because the model machines come in various speeds, but they're still considered the same family, if you will. So for instance, if you have a C654, it's the same machine as the C654, C754. They just come in different speeds. So if you have a C654 and this says C754, it's probably the same family. It's the same machine. Now you may not know that. You're not going to know all the specifics. But if it looks really, really off, say this said like, you know, there was no C and it just said 250, and you have a C654. Then that'll be a good way to know that, you know, they're not even close. But say if just this first number's off, it changed from a C654 to a C554, there's a good chance it's the same model. It's going to work for you. If for some reason it's not printing, that's going to be the first thing to check, is to make sure you are working in the same series, is what I meant to say, of machines. And you can call us or send us a submission online, and we'll let you know if that's in the same family. So that part can be a little bit confusing. So that's how you set it for account codes. Let us know if you have any issues, request service. put in your message here and we'll be glad to assist. All right, this is Chris with Aerotech. Thank you.